caregivers. And if that is you, I understand the journey you're on.
Peter Rosenberger has been a caregiver for 4 decades. He's the host for Hope for the Caregiver, Saturday mornings at 7 Central on AFR.
This is American Family Radio, a listener-supported ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh. President Trump is touting productive negotiations with Iran this week and even claims Tehran gave him a gift related to oil and gas. But the war effort continues. CENTCOM Commander Admiral Brad Cooper says the U.S. has struck 10,000 Iranian military targets.
And if you combine what we've accomplished with the success of our Israeli ally, together we have struck thousands more, clearly demonstrating that we're stronger together.
Iran rejected the White House's 15-point peace plan and responded with its own proposal on state TV, which includes a ban on killing leaders, security guarantees, reparations, and sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz. Iranian officials have denied negotiations are taking place. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt says President Trump isn't bluffing.
President Trump does not bluff. Iran should not miscalculate again. Their last miscalculation cost them their senior leadership, their Navy, their Air Force, and their air defense system. Any violence beyond this point will be because the Iranian regime refused to understand they have already been defeated and refused to come to a deal.
Pressure is mounting on Congress to end the funding shutdown. It's resulted in travel disruptions, missed paychecks, and even warnings of airport closures. But lawmakers have yet to resolve the underlying issue that Democrats want to get rid of immigration enforcement. Senators are expected to vote today on a Republican proposal that would fund the Transportation Security Administration and much of the Department of Homeland Security, except immigration enforcement and removal operations. Podcaster Ben Ferguson says Democrats are doing this because they hate Donald Trump and anyone who voted for him.
This is incompetency at the highest level. Like, what's the upside here for Chuck Schumer? And this is what happens when you have your base that is so extreme now that they can control the sane people in the Democratic Party. This is the socialists and the communists. We hate Trump no matter what, hurt the American people. And the American people should be mad because you've already paid your taxes. You've already paid for these services. You're not receiving what you've already paid for. And if this was really about ICE, ICE is fully funded right now. So that's part of the story that needs to be brought up. I mean, that is messing with people's lives, the economy, and the president's doing everything he can. But Democrats, to be clear, they are holding Americans hostage right now for one reason, because they hate Donald Trump and anyone that voted for him.
And Florida Senator Ashley Moody says if TSA workers aren't being paid, then senators shouldn't be paid.
I have been fully supportive of making sure that we're putting forward rules to suspend senator pay if we can't push through funding. In fact, my colleagues put that on the floor, and the Democrats literally objected and ran out of the room.
Secretary of War Pete Hegseth continues to reform the military chaplaincy, getting rid of the woke, often heretical reforms implemented during the Biden administration. More from Steve Jordahl.
In a video announcement, War Secretary Pete Hegseth said military chaplains were not only assigned duties by the Pentagon, but were called to the service by God. He said their role is essential to the military mission.
The crucible of combat tests more than the body. It tests conviction, character, and spirit. In combat, in crisis, and in loss, a warfighter needs more than a coping mechanism. They need truth, big T truth. They need conviction. They need a shepherd.
Yesterday, Hegseth announced 2 more changes to the service.
The previous system had ballooned to well over 200 faith codes. It was impractical and unusable. Our internal review committee recommended that going forward, the department use 31 religious affiliation codes.
Wiccan or pagan chaplains, for example, are not long for the Corps. Secondly, chaplains will no longer wear their rank insignias.
The memo I will sign today directs chaplains, all of whom are officers, to replace the rank insignia on their uniforms with their religious insignia. And while they will retain rank as an officer, to those they serve, their rank will not be visible.
Hegseth says it can be intimidating for a junior enlisted service member to express vulnerability or to confide in a senior officer. I'm Steve Jordahl.
And benchmark U.S. crude oil was 3.2% higher at $93.25 a barrel. More news online at afn.net. I'm Rusty Pugh.
Looking to take the next step in your education? Blue Mountain Christian University offers graduate degree programs designed for working adults who want to grow professionally and personally. With graduate studies in business, education, and kinesiology, BMCU combines academic excellence with a Christian worldview. With flexible and hybrid formats and supportive faculty, you can pursue a graduate degree while balancing work, family, and calling. Learn more at bmc.edu.
Jenna Ellis in the morning on American Family Radio.
I love talking about the things of God because of truth and the biblical worldview. The U.S. Constitution obligates our government to preserve and protect the rights that our founders recognize come from God, our Creator, not our government. I believe that Scripture in the Bible is very clear that God is the one that raised up each of you, and God has allowed us to be brought here to this specific moment in time.
This is Jenna Ellis in the morning.
Good morning. It is Thursday, March 26th, and Florida is becoming a little bit of a bellwether, perhaps, for the midterms. And very frustratingly, Florida Democrats flipped 2 seats in special legislative elections 2 nights ago. So in the shocker of the night, a Democrat, Brian Nathan, defeated Republican Josie Tomkow in Senate District 14 in that race by 408 votes. So not really a wide margin. So it was 50.25% of the vote to Tomkow's 49.75%. And so the seat has been vacant since August, when Governor Ron DeSantis appointed GOP incumbent Jay Collins to serve as his lieutenant governor. Surprisingly, Collins didn't make any effort whatsoever to promote turning out the vote, to ensuring keeping that seat Republican. So it's gotten quite a bit of flack, I think deservedly, on social media for it. But in the only state Senate election on the ballot, Democrat Brian Nathan, who's a Navy veteran, union organizer, and first-time candidate, shocked the Republican state representative, who had the Trump endorsement, and everyone just kind of assumed that. And she also had a huge fundraising lead over Nathan, and was heavily favored in a district that Collins won by 10 points in 2022, the last time the seat was on the ballot. And Trump also won that district by more than 7 points in 2024. So what exactly is going on in Florida? Well, my good friend Auron MacIntyre, who's a host at The Blaze, is here. And Auron, our friend Daniel Horowitz commented on this, and I'd like to get your reaction to his commentary first, and then we want to hear your thoughts as well. But he's just really frustrated, and I think kind of echoes a lot of sentiments when Daniel Horowitz is saying, we need a new party because, everybody's just sort of sick of the GOP just running on, MAGA, MAGA, and everything is great, and, Trump, Trump, and not really articulating policy and allowing Democrats to just basically lie, but run on essentially our message, but articulate policy that they have no intention of actually fulfilling as candidates. So let's listen to Horowitz. This is cut 2.
We need a new party and a new movement built upon pro-human versus transhuman, land, food, ranching, currency, sovereignty, ordered liberty. You watch all these TV ads from these Republicans. They're pathetic. Trump, 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 fight, fight. I mean, they're literally, I'm sorry, they have like a 70 IQ. You know what Democrats are doing? You know the guy that beat that hack Perez liberal Republican in Tampa? He's a Navy veteran, electrician, running as a family man. Again, they obviously get in there and lie, but I'm telling you, they're not stupid. They're running on our message.
All right, Auron, your thoughts. Good morning.
Well, I think the problem is that that's not always the Republican message. I agree with a lot of what Mr. Horowitz said there, but I think he knows as well as we do that ultimately Republicans are very far from consistent on that message, and that's certainly one of the issues that they've run up against. I think that while it can be frustrating that many Republican candidates are just kind of doing the cheerleading thing, I'm also somewhat skeptical that properly articulated policy is also the problem. We know that midterms are always dicey for an incumbent president, for an incumbent party. That's pretty much politics 101. But on top of this, we saw a radical shift in foreign policy right before we started to run into these special elections. And everybody watched their gasoline in Florida go up $1 overnight. And, these were already issues that the president was facing with, the idea that ICE was too rough and these kind of things. Now, ultimately, I think you have to go forward with deportations and that kind of thing. But the optics issue was already on the table. And involving us in a new war obviously was not helpful to this. Now, I think, again, the messaging is a problem, but I think near term, the obvious answer to this question is the Republican Party decided to go full bore into something that was radically unpopular with most of the country and is now going to pay the cost, as pretty much everybody who was warning them about this saw coming.
Yeah, and here in Florida in particular, though, do you think that these special elections really reflect more of a national sentiment, or is it more that the Republican base is just overall discouraged and depressed in terms of even being aware of the turnout or wanting to engage in politics? Because I just don't see the enthusiasm overall. And while, there may be specific issues, and certainly, we can point to different federal issues. Not even yet passing the SAVE Act. Things that obviously should be really simple wins. It seems like just overall the Republican Party or isn't able to resonate with the average Republican conservative voter in the same enthusiasm that we saw coming out of 2024.
Well, that's certainly true. And of course, the fact that Governor DeSantis is term limited and will not be around providing the same level of executive leadership and energy to the party is also a big deal in Florida itself. So there's certainly state and regional questions here. I don't think that two state-level races can give you this deep understanding of where we'll be in the midterms, but it certainly is an indicator, especially with the dramatic turn that you saw in those races. And so, this is, I think, if our thesis is that the problem here is that Republicans simply were not energized and didn't turn out, well, that's probably very true, but I think that would apply just as easily nationally as it would statewide. There could be compounding factors due to Florida's current situation, but I don't think this, bodes well for those larger issues. Again, you have radical changes in kind of the view that I think many people had of the Trump administration and the momentum of the Republican Party. In addition to the war, as you pointed out, there's very little that Congress has done when it comes to things like the SAVE Act, when it comes to enshrining many of Trump's early wins in this term. They simply did not take a lot of action and have largely seen as useless by most Republicans, which is not going to help drive turnout either. So unfortunately, I think there's just a lot of factors that point to the idea that we're not going to see a highly energized Republican base now or in the actual midterms.
Yeah. And I think The Hill, shockingly, kind of articulated this as well during their coverage, where they said Democrats flipped 2 state House seats, including the district where President Trump's Mar-a-Lago residence is located. That seat, located in the 87th district for the House, has flipped in the past, so may not necessarily be a reflection on Trump and his policies, despite him endorsing in the race. However, and this is where I agree with this analysis, it is a sign of growing dissatisfaction with Republicans as the national mood weakens under Trump's second administration. And, that's where I find it really frustrating because, we had so much momentum, especially with how broadly and widely Trump resoundingly won 2024, to go in with a lot of momentum. He had the mandate, and it seems like the places that he chose and is choosing to spend political capital are more of a reflection of perhaps his personal legacy concerns than really what the voters necessarily are wanting to prioritize. And I just don't think that overall is going to bode well for Republicans. And when you're not focused on issues that the base is prioritizing, it really does disincentivize and increases dissatisfaction among the base, and especially in midterms that historically the incumbent doesn't perform well. You would think that the GOP would be concerned about this, especially, Auron, because we know if Democrats get back into power in especially Washington, but then even, some of these states, like if we don't have a good governor that follows DeSantis, I mean, the Democrats are going to run even more wild with lawfare, with, crazy policy and things that clearly, the base isn't going, the Republican base isn't going to want. So it just seems like the GOP, I just don't understand what they're thinking and what the national leadership is doing.
Well, I mean, as to what the main bulk of the party is thinking, I think they're thinking they want to be done with Trump and MAGA, and that's been the plan for a while here. I think that's what a large amount of this conservative civil war is about. I think that's why people are trying to stir up the J.D. Vance versus Marco Rubio debate, because ultimately the idea is we want to return back to kind of business as usual, mainstream, con Inc., neoconservatism. I think that's been a push for a little while now. As soon as they thought that they could turn Trump into a lame duck, that was where they wanted to be. Now, I think the base, absolutely, as you're pointing out, is still expecting Trump to deliver. And early on, with those, flurry of executive orders, there was a lot of promises that were kept. But the problem was always going to be that Trump had to have legislation passed too. No matter what the Democrats will tell you, Trump isn't a dictator. He can only do so much under the executive office. So he did everything he could in those first few months, but without Congress actually taking, the ball, picking it up and moving it across the goal line, there's only so much you could do domestically. And so I think that's why Trump ultimately moved to foreign policy once the judges started pushing back, making it impossible for him to continue to carry out the things that he needed to from the executive branch. The only thing left for him to really get done that he could take immediate action on were foreign policy items. And frankly, these were things that his voters did not elect him to do. They elected him to be a domestic president to resolve these issues here. So you can understand the Trump administration's frustration and their desire to continue to secure wins and maintain that momentum. But at the same time, as we get entangled more and more abroad, that means less and less focus is there on the domestic issues that they ultimately wanted resolved by the Trump administration. And so I think that's why you're seeing this felt lost momentum, this almost like you've already been sucked into a quagmire, even though that's not really where the war is at. But you can kind of feel just that emotional slowdown from everything that's been happening, all these additional things that really the voters weren't looking for that are being tagged on to the Trump presidency and are weighing it down.
Yeah, I think that's really brilliant analysis. And we've said for a while that the regulars in the GOP do want to return to business as usual. So there's this kind of fracturing. And then, of course, the podcast wars elites are wanting to take advantage of that to kind of go their own way and make this sort of the America only kind of party, and they're capitalizing on some of these other issues that I think don't really make sense overall. But for the White House, it may be that they're still looking for those wins, and that shift to foreign policy makes sense under that kind of a framework. But overall, they still do need to be pushing back against these rogue judges. I've been personally very disappointed in this DOJ, like every DOJ under Trump, and there hasn't been accountability for anything that happened during Biden or during Obama. I mean, for anything, any of the lawfare that's come against Trump or any of his associates, there hasn't been any sort of accountability. And it almost seems like nobody cares from the White House. And that's frustrating to a lot of people who are very concerned about that and concerned about the future. And overall, it just doesn't seem like domestic policy is a priority. But that's also, Auron, I think, reflected even on the state level, because, here in Florida, where you and I both are, it's been, I think, very frustrating as well to see that, Trump has endorsed Byron Donalds for governor, who is by far a, ridiculously weak candidate. And if he gets the nomination as a former Democrat, kind of a Democrat light, as I like to characterize him, he has a really significant chance at losing to the likely Democrat who's actually a former Republican congressman. I mean, which just is interesting. Who's running as a moderate that kind of muddies the waters. And currently, Governor DeSantis, as much as he leads, he executes, he's America's governor, he's fantastic. He hasn't weighed in so far in this race to endorse someone other than Byron. And we know that he won't endorse Byron. And, there have been a lot of rumors of, well, is he not going to endorse because he doesn't think anybody can overcome Byron? Is he not endorsing because he doesn't want to go against Trump because he's looking at after he leaves office going into the administration? All of those things. And I give him, kind of some breathing room here. I've sort of gone back and forth on, his own personal preference on this. But at the same time, I really wish that he would lead the state and say, put all of his cards on the table and say, I want to leave Florida in the best possible hands and in the best possible shape when he is termed out. Because if we lose the free state of Florida to either Byron or the Democrat, we're losing a significant domestic advantage.
Yeah, I think after a run like Ron DeSantis's, you really don't want to just see the entire state handed back to poor governance or put in jeopardy on the chessboard. Obviously, this is one of the most important states in the U.S. right now, and you can't just see it as this bastion of kind of conservative governance during COVID lockdowns and everything else, and all the pushback that Ron DeSantis had in these key moments, and then just hand it over to someone squishy. I've been, lobbying my efforts that we still have time to make Ron DeSantis king of Florida. We just need an amendment in the Constitution so that we can still have royal titles in Florida only, and then we just name the DeSantis clan as our royal family, and we've got democracy in the 49 other states. We can try monarchy in one. I think that'll work out just fine. But beyond that, I don't see a short-term solution to this.
Yeah, and I've seen your posts on that, and Ron DeSantis, first of his name. Let's just do it in Florida, and what's actually really amazing about kind of that line of thought is that our founders assumed and presumed that we would select and prefer not only Christians as our leaders, but actually good leaders, and so even a constitutional republic can fail in terms of promoting a more perfect union and preserving and protecting freedom and liberty and all of these things that are central to conservatism if we, the people, just hand it over to incompetent leadership or worse, really the very domestic enemies that the Constitution warns about. And so, so even though, I know that that's kind of tongue in cheek, it's also a real considered commentary, I think, on what exactly we're doing with our American experiment. Because if we're to the point that for a free state like Florida that has had so many wins on the board, and yet now the future of Florida is so unclear, what does that say about overall, not just the Republican Party, but, American conservatism?
Yeah, I mean, we have seen over and over again that the GOP just does not have a significant force of truly conservative and, more importantly, really vigorous candidates out there. We talk about the policy positions, and they matter quite a bit. But what made Ron DeSantis as effective as he wasn't just his stated policy positions. Lots of people throughout the years have had similar positions to Ron DeSantis. What made Ron DeSantis different was his execution, his willingness to make things happen, his effectiveness as an executive, somebody who can lead, someone who's not afraid to use power, somebody who's not constrained by ideology. Ron DeSantis would say things like, look, I know that we talk about a free market here, or we talk about this thing here, but we have to care about our citizens in this case. We have to care about the well-being of our people in this case. We're not going to just fold up under some regulation that Joe Biden has because the rules say so. We're going to do what's best for Floridians when it comes to COVID, or when it comes to teaching students in the classroom, when gender identity and these kind of things. And it's that willingness to push back, the willingness to fight, the willingness to be aggressive in things like cleaning up voter rolls that made the difference with Ron DeSantis. So don't get me wrong. I want people to be right on the issues, of course. But before we need people to be right on the issues, what we need more than anything is people who are willing to act and lead and exercise power.
Yeah, absolutely, Auron. And, before we run out of time here, so overall, I think the base sees this. There are people like you and I and many, many others that are clamoring for the national and local GOP to understand all of this. And so, where do you see the emphasis and focus of at least the Trump administration, where they need to be ahead of the midterms to at least give the GOP a fighting chance?
I think you need to end the war, and I think you have the off-ramp at this point. You've killed a large number of Iran's leaders. You've destroyed its navy. You've destroyed its air force. You've significantly degraded its ability to build weapons or anything else. And at this point, you can simply figure out how to manage the Strait of Hormuz and get out of there. And if you can do that in a timely fashion, you're going to see oil prices drop. I think that will help the average person. I think when you see what's going on with ICE in the airports right now and them helping to reduce wait times, that increases the goodwill of organizations like ICE and then reflects even better on Trump. I think there's a lot of ground to be gained by shifting back to the domestic, wrapping up those things in the foreign policy that you've invested your time in, bringing the focus back home, getting gas prices down, making sure people are getting through the airports on time, getting deportations back on track in a smart way, fulfilling some of those domestic promises. I think that will have a huge shift. The American people will forgive you for a month or two of bad gas prices, as long as they're not stretching into October, November.
Yeah, well said, Auron MacIntyre. Always appreciate your analysis. And, you got to wonder if the administration is looking at the polls. I mean, that's one of Trump's favorite pastimes. So, you got to think that he is, and being very concerned about the midterms, and they can't just have rose-colored glasses on all this and say, well, go MAGA, and then not really actually pay attention to not only articulating but delivering on the issues that Trump campaigned on in 2024 and why the American people elected him overwhelmingly. And so I really wonder what exactly happened to that Trump mandate, and I would love to see, again, this DOJ get a lot more serious about wins. We'll be right back with more.
This is Abraham Hamilton III with AFR, and we're sending Bibles. Here's Michael with Bible League International.
Abraham, here's a very important update on the effort between AFR and Bible League to bless 4,000 waiting believers this Easter all around the world who have been denied God's Word, and that includes a senior saint in Tanzania.
The area where she was at, she had never seen a printed Bible study or even a Bible until she was in retirement age and received her very first Bible as a result of the generosity of donors. What an incredible gift to her, to that village.
Bibleless believers all over the world are yearning to read the precious resurrection story. Listen, if you love your Bible, if God has used His Word to grow you, give that privilege to others. This Easter, AFR and Bible League want to bless 4,000 waiting believers. You've done it for 1,000, 3,000 to go. So at $5 a Bible, $100 since $20. Will you call 800-YES-WORD? 800-YES-WORD. That's 800-YES-WORD. Or give it sendbiblesnow.org. That's sendbiblesnow.org.
right here, you can see this is the outline of her face. Her hand is right here, her arm, and her leg. I was so shocked. I was really happy. I couldn't believe that I have a little child in me.
Preborn offers compassionate, Christ-centered care and free ultrasounds to moms with unplanned pregnancies. And every day, Preborn's network of clinics rescues 200 babies' lives. You can take action and help bring new life to a mother and a baby by sponsoring an ultrasound to introduce her to the life growing inside of her.
I'm going to keep my baby, and I'm going to be a great mom.
One ultrasound is just $28. $140 will help to rescue 5 babies. And when you donate monthly, you'll receive stories and pictures of babies you help to save. To donate securely, just call pound 250 and say the keyword baby. That's pound 250 baby. Or go to preborn.com/AFR.
Hello, Americans. I'm Todd Starnes. Stand by for news and commentary next. Muslims desecrated memorials to the 9/11 terrorist attacks in New York City and in Concord, California. In Concord, the Muslims draped a banner over a memorial inside a cemetery. And in New York City, Muslim prayer rugs were thrown across a memorial to more than 400 firefighters who were killed on 9/11. Now, many are wondering if the desecrations were unintentional or perhaps if the Islamists were sending a message. Now, the Islamists have a history of invading and conquering nations dating all the way back to the 7th century. Christians and Jews were slaughtered, and the cultural heritage of the conquered nations were also destroyed. The American people would do well to take a crash course in Islamic history. The message that is inscribed on the fire department's memorial is a declaration. We will never forget. But I'm afraid that's exactly what we've done. We've forgotten, and there will be a price to pay for that. I'm Todd Starnes.
Welcome back to Jenna Ellis in the Morning on American Family Radio.
Welcome back. Well, Spain is facing one of its most emotional and controversial cases in recent years as a 25-year-old young woman prepares to undergo euthanasia today on March 26th after a prolonged legal battle that reached European courts. So this coming from Spanish News WION, Spain's controversial euthanasia case. Why this young woman, Noela Castillo Ramos, who she is and why her story has sparked global debate. So this is just a really terribly tragic case, but also the reason behind it. So according to multiple reports, this could become Spain's first euthanasia case primarily linked to severe depression alongside physical suffering. This story has spread rapidly online, triggering strong reactions ranging from sympathy to outrage and raising difficult questions about whether the system protected her or failed her. So this young woman was unfortunately gang raped, and then she attempted to commit suicide. And because of that attempt, which ultimately failed, became paralyzed after that traumatic assault, and so now has been asking for about a year and a half for the Spanish government to be allowed to end her own life. And obviously, the system is failing her if the response from the state is, we feel so bad for you, so yes, let's let you go and commit suicide and actually facilitate and assist that endeavor. So for more on this, let's welcome in Ryan Helfenbein, who is the Vice President of Communications at Liberty University and the founding executive director of the Standing for Freedom Center. And Ryan, this is a horrifically tragic case on so many different elements of this, but to think that ending one's life intentionally and having the state help facilitate that is ever the answer is just tragically hopeless.
No, it absolutely is, Jenna. And we're seeing an alarming trend in the West. And it's happening across Europe. It's happening in North America, in the Western Hemisphere, Canada, and many other states in the United States passing, legal assisted suicide. We basically have been pointing out that there's a mental health crisis in the West. There's a mental health crisis in the United States, loneliness, depression, and of course suicide are at skyrocketed rates. And we obviously know the answer as to why this is the case. It's because so many have turned away from God. And we have a society that is severed from its roots. And many people in the West, the Christian West, don't attend a regular worship service, aren't a part of a church. They don't read their Bible. And so as a result, not only do they not know who God is, but they don't know the intention and the purpose of their life. What value does it serve? And so life really becomes about self-fulfillment in the West, and it becomes about self-actualization. And if I can't live the life I imagined, or the life I want, if I don't have a high quality of life, we hear that all the time, I'm just going to choose to end my life. And by the way, it's my life. Why can't I end it? And so many people have made that horrific decision. And so this case, of course, we've had numerous others more recently where young people, her case is very tragic because she's been living in a condition where she's basically been paraplegic, and we sympathize with that. But even still, that is not grounds, that is not an excuse or justification to end one's life. The problem with the West and the legal system is that we've lost touch with our Judeo-Christian values. We've lost touch with the conviction that every man, woman, and child is created in God's image and is worthy of protection. And these laws against suicide were designed to acknowledge as much. It is not about the quality of life. It's about the sanctity of each individual life. And so even when someone might not enjoy the state that they're in, we have to acknowledge that there is a creator, a designer, and a purposer of our lives. And ultimately, we have to honor God, even if a person feels as though they're beyond hope.
Absolutely, and I could not agree more, Ryan. And as you were speaking about the condition in the West that focuses so much on the individual and our own desires, and basically it comes down to selfishness. I see that even in a conservative movement that has, I think, transformed what rightly should be a view of individualism, as in we are individuals that all are created, human beings uniquely created in the image of God, having inherent dignity and worth. Like you said, we have individual rights, as opposed to collectivism, or this idea that we're all just kind of cogs in the system and whatever serves the collective good, it doesn't matter the individual. No, we push back against that, and we're for individualism. But it's been transformed in the West, unfortunately, and I think dangerously, almost to this hyper individualism that puts the individual and our desires and our will over the unique design of the human being, saying if we are made in the image of God, then our identity is only found in Him. And the people who we have these rights, but the focus and the purpose of those rights are not just to serve our own whims and desires and to be individuals, but within the context of a relationship with our Creator, first and foremost, but then within the context of the family design and purpose, and within the context of the meaning and the purpose that we were created for. And I think that in the West, we've lost that. And this affirmation of, whatever feels good to you, whatever your desire is, that has to be paramount over what is not a collective good, but what is actually good.
It's so well said. God has designed us. I think one of the things that we see in Genesis 1 and 2 in creation, after God created Adam on the sixth day, He said it's not good for man to be alone. Now, immediately we go to the context of marriage, and that's certainly correct. But it's also correct to recognize that for everyone, married and unmarried, we were designed for family. We were designed for community. And traditionally, we recognize as Christians that we belong to three different kinds of communities. One is, of course, the family first. It's the first institution ever created. And so all of us came from parents. All of us did. Not everybody knows their parents. There are many orphans, sadly. But we come from parents. And so God designed the family and family governance and structure for a reason. And there is a sense of onerousness and responsibility and accountability within the family. God designed it that way. And that's a wonderful thing. The other thing for Christians is we belong to the community of the church. We belong to a church family, hopefully. We're not automatons. We're not radical individuals. It's not just, the unholy trinity of me, my Bible, and Jesus. No, we need to be belonging to a community of believers. And there is in that community of the church an authority, an accountability, a sense of belonging and responsibility. And we give to that community. And then the last thing, of course, is government. You think about the state, or you think about the nation that we live in, our neighbors. We start with the city or the county, the municipality where we live, the locality, and then beyond that, the state, and then the nation. And so this radical individualism, this almost like libertarian or libertine kind of individualism, which emphasizes, this is why I'm not a libertarian actually, which emphasizes as long as I don't do any harm to anyone else, I will just decide what I think is in my own best interest. Or even if it hurts me, what harm is it as long as it doesn't hurt anyone else? And these are the advocates for marijuana or for looser laws on pornography or any number of other things. Ultimately, they individualize it to the self. And this is why, as a conservative, we say, no, that's actually not the case, because everything, it doesn't just come down to the self. We have a sense of duty and responsibility to others. And we're not collectivists like those Marxists who want to destroy the family and the church and just relegate everything to the state. But we're also not these radical libertarian individuals who say, hey, I just want to get high every day as long as I don't hurt anyone else. Or I just want to, Jenna, take my own life in assisted suicide as long as it doesn't hurt anyone else. My quality of life has been diminished, and it would be better if I didn't live. That's what I think. And so there have been many people that have these two radical views, but as Christians, we recognize that God first made us in a relation, designed us for a relationship with him. And then secondly, he designed us for a relationship with others. And there's a duty and responsibility there to love our neighbor as ourselves. And I think you're exactly right to pinpoint this, because so much of what is wrong in the West is we've isolated ourselves from God first. And as a result, you're seeing loneliness, depression, suicide. We're isolating ourselves from others.
Yeah, absolutely. And, that is where the libertarian or the libertine autonomous view, worldview ends, is saying, okay, if there's no harm to others, then ultimately what's wrong with physician-assisted suicide? And obviously, as Christians, we know what's wrong with that morally and ethically, and we reject that. And so you can't have this sort of libertine autonomy. And conservatism doesn't reject the individual, but we reject the idea that the individual is self-defining, self-justifying, and accountable to no higher authority. And so the conservative argument begins by rejecting this kind of modern assumption that freedom means just doing whatever I want. And we're seeing that kind of mentality of the hyper-individualistic view damaging marriages, families, jobs. I mean, they're in every way the relationship with others and ultimately our relationship with God, by suggesting that true freedom means doing whatever I want. And so any constraint, whether it's government, church, or family, any constraint on the individual and our wants and our desires then is inherently bad because it's against this idea of self. And that is completely against the biblical worldview and true freedom, which is ordered toward the good. It exists within moral limits grounded in the laws of nature and of nature's God, in truth, in divine authority. It's not self-created but discovered, as our founders recognized. And so I think that we need to re-anchor the individual in responsibility, as you said, a responsibility to others within the context of the family, the church, the government, and within the context as well of moral order. Because if we don't have a liberty defined as a well-ordered society, then we get to where I think the West has gotten to with so many of these examples, like this case in Spain, where the government is just saying, okay, well, if that's what the individual wants, it doesn't harm anybody else, then I guess we need to facilitate that expression of self and that desire, where of course this is going against ordered liberty and ultimately the moral order that comes from God himself. So we need to re-anchor our perception of the individual as still under the authority and the three spheres of authority that God himself ordained. Because really, Ryan, it is a good thing for the individual, even, for people like me who are single. It's like, I still to not confine the individual and dampen our free expression, but ultimately to serve the purpose of allowing me to have human flourishing in a way that God intended. And we have to get back to this idea that ultimately the family is really the closest and best expression of legitimate authority for the individual to thrive within that context.
Yeah. Yes. Very, very, very well said. God has designed us, of course, to enjoy relationship with one another. He's designed us to enjoy relationship with him. There's a responsibility. There is an authority. I want to shift to something else, and just the beauty of life, that God has created this world and the wonders and the awes within it to ultimately point to him. And what I see with this individual, sadly, Noella, and there are many others, it's clear she does not know who God is, who her maker is. And I've seen and I've met with many people who have horrific conditions that they're living under, or they're living in conditions even that are not horrific, but are manageable. It is possible to live as a paraplegic. It is possible to live with certain physical conditions and mental conditions, and it is a very difficult and challenging life. But if you can know God and you can know and understand him and his purposes for your life, you know that the God who created the universe and everything that's in it, and the God who created you loves you, and he has a purpose for you. And no, it is not to have your best life now, but it is to find joy and contentment and satisfaction in him, and in him first. To find God as your true and ultimate riches and your treasure. And then ultimately, yes, he has a purpose for your life. It's not as though the Lord wants to destroy you. Jesus says, come to me, all you who are weak and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. And he is gentle and he is lowly, and his yoke is easy and his burden is light. And so this is for anyone who might be struggling with depression or negative thoughts or intrusive thoughts or even suicidal ideation, is that God does love you, and he did create beauty and joy and things in this world that ultimately point to him. There are pleasures in this world that are good. And so much of what we see today in the saccharine of life is this sort of fake. It's not real sugar, it's not real pleasure. It's not real contentment or satisfaction. So many people who are looking for liberation and freedom have only found bondage, and they've yoked themselves to things that cannot save and cannot bring joy or peace, or that sense in which, oh, my life is lived now with purpose. And so I think that's the other side of it: authority, responsibility, belonging, but also this idea of, go out there and cultivate this earth and multiply, and understand what God has put you in this world to do. And I think that many people are missing that today.
So well said. And we're going to take a break here. Ryan Helfenbein, and he's going to be with me again after the break. But, this is the chief purpose of why Christians are here, is to promote the truth of the gospel of Christ, to provide that hope that only comes with a restoration of our broken relationship with the Lord, understanding our purpose for being here, which is to love the Lord, to know Him, to worship Him, and to ultimately then serve each other, not to just be these hyper individualistic individuals to say, what are my wants and desires and needs and preferences, and to be so selfish that we forget that our first and chief purpose is to love God and worship Him. And so I really hope and pray for this young woman that she'll learn the truth before it's too late, and for the West as well, that we will get back to the truth before it's too late. We'll be right back.
If we lose this cultural war, we're going to have a hedonistic, humanistic society.
Discover the story of the culture warrior Don Wildman and how he went head-to-head with Hollywood, Playboy, the homosexual agenda, and the Disney empire. The movement Don started paved the way for Christians to boldly stand for truth and righteousness in a hostile culture. Watch Culture Warrior today for free. Visit culturewarrior.movie.
Every weekday, strengthen your family and your faith with Family Talk.
I had the same brain when I was at the bottom of the class that I had at the top of the class. Exactly the same brain, but a different attitude. What does that tell us about our responsibility to develop the intellect of the people in our spheres of influence?
Don't miss Family Talk with Dr. James Dobson every weekday at 6:30 a.m. and 9:30 p.m. Central on AFR.
They're coming for your family, not with guns, not with armies, but with laws, with lawsuits, with ballots and bureaucrats. Parental rights are under attack. Marriage is being redefined. Your values, they want them silenced, and they're counting on you to do nothing. But here's the thing, we're not backing down. I'm Walker Wildman, and AFA Action is in the fight, in the legislature, in the courtroom, and at the ballot box. We're stopping bad legislation, we're challenging activist judges, and through iVoter Guide, we're helping Christians vote like it matters, because it does. Thousands of families are already standing with us, and I believe the American family is still worth fighting for, but we can't do it without you, and we need your help today. Visit afaaction.net right now. Give today. Join us on the front lines, because the other side isn't slowing down, and neither can we. afaaction.net. Your voice, your values, your vote.
The following is a real-life story from Trinity Debt Management.
I had a lot of credit card debt, and it stressed me out. But what I thought was a solution turned out to be a problem. I kept hearing ads about debt settlement that seemed too good to be true. And actually, it was. When I called, they told me to stop paying my bills. That didn't sound right to me at all, so I hung up. Later, I found out that debt settlement is bad, real bad. Then I learned that there is a right way to pay off your credit cards. It's called a debt management program from the great team at Trinity. Trinity had a plan. In the end, I paid off my bills, I saved thousands, and I even improved my credit score.
If credit card debt has you down, call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813.
My name is Heather. Please forget debt settlement and remember Trinity Debt Management.
1-800-788-1813.
Welcome back to Jenna Ellis in the Morning on American Family Radio.
Welcome back, and I am still here with my special guest this morning, Ryan Helfenbein, the Vice President of Communications at Liberty University. And we need to talk also about this thread that went viral. That is more of just a cultural commentary on, again, how we're sort of losing the West. And there was a thread that went viral from a young man who was talking about, in kind of honest, very honest, beautiful detail, the fact that when he and his wife got married, he had chosen to be a virgin until he got married, to live rightly and, under scripture. His wife had been forgiven much, and she had had a formerly promiscuous past, and yet she found Christ and then, of course, was cleansed of all unrighteousness. And so the point of this thread was that in them coming together in marriage, it was a wonderful thing. And isn't it amazing how God forgives? And of course, posting this on a forum like X, this guy just got absolutely lambasted in the comments with people, making fun of him, saying how dare you post this about your wife, even though apparently she had a blog where she was, very open with it as well. And overall, Ryan, and we only have a few minutes left, but overall, I think that the moral of this story is choose your forum. Because if this is in the context of, a Bible study at church and people who actually understand and have the Christian worldview and are coming to the conversation understanding the beauty of redemption, then there's a very different response than putting this out on a thread in a forum like X where you are getting literally the bottom of the barrel of so many people who just their intention to be on some of these online platforms is simply to troll, to make fun of these things. And it's a reminder, I think, that we need to be careful as individuals to not, as the Bible says, cast pearls before swine.
I think that's well said. I think there's a lot of wisdom in recognizing when, where, context, all of it, right? Now that it is out there, I was reading an article, that says, simply there are silent people who will engage it. Yes, it's gross to see the groyper crowd and the grifter crowd and all of those people on social media that are going to poke fun at it. And culturally, we're hitting a certain kind of fault line in Western culture where we have obviously toxic masculinity, but we also have hyperfeminism. People don't really believe in redemption stories if they've never really encountered one. If they've not been forgiven, they don't know what forgiveness looks and feels like. I'm reminded of what Paul says, when he's talking about, do you think that the unrighteous will inherit the kingdom? And he says, don't be deceived, sexual immoral, the idolaters, adulterers, homosexuality, thieves, the greedy, the drunkards, none of them will inherit the kingdom of God. But then he says, and such were some of you, but you were washed, sanctified, you were justified in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. I agree that there are certain places you just don't put these stories up, but I also agree that there is a narrow, probably segment of the population. There is probably a young man or young woman who is reading that also and saying, hey, there's hope for me. There is hope for me. How do I find that hope? And so I certainly wouldn't use X to do that. I've got some other friends that are in the pro-life movement that have shared their testimonies, and they got attacked. They chose life. They had a baby, in a crisis pregnancy, and chose life. And they were attacked by major social influencers on social media. But we have to go back to the gospel that Jesus Christ is the hope of salvation for all who believe.
Amen. And that's the anchor of everything that we come back to, regardless of what the story is, whether it's political, cultural, theological, whatever it is. We come back to the hope that we have in Christ, and that is the reason for living. So Ryan Helfenbein, really well said. You can follow him on X, and you should. to have some good content. Of course, not just, all of these trolls. And as always, you can reach me and my team, Jenna, at afr.net.